So much of what we've discussed about the ongoing crisis in Gaza, which apparently is not a crisis, not a humanitarian crisis, according to the Israeli ambassador, Zipi Hotzaveli, and plenty of IDF representatives have come and said it's not actually a humanitarian crisis, despite all of the dead children. Or no matter how many dead children there are, not necessarily a humanitarian crisis as far as the Israeli far right are concerned. I mean, to be fair, given what they've said about being the law of the jungle and fighting against animals, as far as the Israeli far right are concerned, they're not even fighting against humans, and therefore human rights don't apply. You can't have a humanitarian crisis if they don't view their opponents as human. They can view the civilians of Gaza as human. The only way I can even glean the way that they've been looking at this kind of stuff. And the worst response to this was so this is Ian Dunt, right? He's like a liberal political commentator who has this god awful podcast called Oh God, What Now? Trying to make sense of the crazy world we live in. Again, exactly what like we were talking about the other day, when this group of people who just forgot that there was stuff going badly wrong before 2016 and then got into politics as soon as Brexit happened, because they are deeply incurious people. Obviously, this man was somebody that was a critic, a very harsh critic of Jumbly Crumbles, the jam man himself, right? For all of this, just continually taking whatever the establishment media line was on Jumbly Crumbles. And despite all of this time, right, Jumbly Crumbles was the man warning about all of this. Like, Rachel Sharby literally put out a tweet saying there were loads of us who were warning that these kind of things were coming soon, that the continual antagonistic relationship between the Hamas leadership and the government of Israel was always going to lead to these heightened tensions that could lead to something like this happening, and the ending the blockade, ending the occupation, resuming peace talks, there being a dialogue between the governments of both of these territories was the only way to be able to prevent something like this happening. And yet people like Ian Dunn, this kind of media class of people, these deeply incurious people, spending all of this time going, oh, well, no, I can't believe you're talking about your pet issue of Palestine, right? Oh, God, why don't you talk about some real problems rather than continue talking about your pet issue of Palestine? Even whilst children were dying in Gaza, Margaret Hodge was on Sky News with Owen Jones saying, oh, you're using this as an excuse to bring up your pet issue, as if ongoing child death was just some kind of hobby horse that Owen Jones cared about flippantly, rather than something that we have been continually thinking of and holding regard of in our minds for a long time, because it's relevant, because the desire to there to be a dialogue between the governing parties of each of these regions to ensure stability and to ensure something like this didn't happen was really important. And it wasn't just us having our own little thing that we're obsessed with. It was important. It's important because this might spread into being a regional conflict, which Western nations might have to get involved in. And then this is going to be very relevant to us if the Middle East becomes destabilized yet again. We end up in 2002. We end up in a position where we have Jewish schools closing because people have poured blood over them, trying to blame them for the crimes of Israel, or that Muslim boys in America are getting stabbed because they believe that they are somehow to blame for what's happening with the massacres that went on in Israel on the 7th, right? After all of this, this was super fucking relevant, because geopolitical conflicts are always been relevant to political powers that have such a large role in terms of the world and the United Nations and the Security Council, like the UK is. And they go, why are you talking about, that's not a real problem talking about Palestine? We fucking told you. We told you this entire time during like the Corbyn era that this was going to be super important, right? It was important that we talked about the state of the area at that time. It was important every day to talk about the lack of recognition of UN Resolution 194. All of this malarkey that was going on during the 2015 to 2019 period, and we were told to shut up. And then there was what quite frankly was just a neo-McCarthyism going on, where we are seeing it right now. We are seeing the results of that neo-McCarthyism right now. The sensible position of wanting peace talks was lambasted and removed from the body politic, so much so that never happened, or was never mediated, at least by the UK. We never recognised the state of Palestine. None of that kind of stuff happened, and it's led to the tensions that's broken with the events of the last other week or whatever it was. And because of that same position, where now we can't even talk about anything to do deal with this, lest somebody be accused of anti-Semitism, where we have the current leader of the Labour Party might be tearing their own party apart by appearing to tacitly endorse war crimes, so that the ICJP and groups of other lawyers as well are referring the Labour Party front bench to the International Criminal Court for potential aiding and abetting of war crimes, because their position that they've taken has had to be entirely through this this manufactured neo-McCarthyism around criticising the state of Israel, where we have people on GB News, people on TV. We have the BBC calling pro-Palestine protests pro-Hamas, which is not the same thing in any sense of the word, or people like Nigel Farage doing the same thing. Just kind of this massive conflation where it's saying maybe it's bad when children get war crimed can now be used, oh, you're just a woke anti-Semite, right? And people will, I literally tweet out some conservative strategists saying, oh, well, we need to ride the coattails of critique of calling these people anti-Semites to be able to fight back against anti-white racism, for example. Not that that's a widespread opinion, but this is a strategist that's put this stuff out. And all of the know-nothing liberals, the fucking intellectually stunted liberal types, just lap this stuff up. James O'Brien tweeting out, oh, this is the Labour are now the party of Brexit betrayal and Holocaust and all that. That's a real thing. Simon Heffer's ridiculous comments that I won't repeat on stream for TOS reasons. Who now have a blank check. They have now complete carte blanche to whatever they want, because this neo-McCarthyism has led to the point that I mentioned before, where neither the current government or the opposition feels fit to actually call the government of Israel out for the war crimes it's committing. And for a very long period, it was actually the position where they were abetting these same war crimes. That's exactly what it is. These people are surprised now. How are they fucking surprised that these things have been continually been doing with complete impunity? Because all they looked at was, oh, Jumbly Crumbles, anti-Semite, without actually looking at the reality of the entirety of the Israel-Palestine conflict from 1948 until today. No research, no understanding, no historiographical analysis of what happened from then until now. Nothing. Just, oh, well, this media outlet told me that he put the wreath on the terrorists and that means he's the bad man, right? And without any actual curious look into the reality of the situation. And this is where we are. This is the position that we're in, chat. They've given tacit support up until this point. And then the thing happens and all we can say is sit here and say, I told you so. All we can do is sit here and say, I told you so. And I don't want to do that. Me saying I told you so will not bring all of the dead Israelis and the dead Palestinians back to life. No amount of us wagging our fingers and trying to point out how wrong these people are, none of that will be able to bring back any of these dead people. All of these people who've been killed as a result of the destabilization of this particular region, because no one wants to hold any of these people accountable. Complete impunity. Blank check from the West. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to just go off on this kind of stuff. It's just infuriating. Like, I'm so livid at the state of our politics in this country, where you can have marches of people, whole marches of people in London simultaneously with each other being conflated, right? Think with people marching, not think little children to die in Palestine, and the media kind of uniformly trying to paint these people as terrorist sympathizers, as being pro-Hamas. Even the state broadcasted, even the BBC was calling us pro-Hamas. And the worst part about all of this as well, is it's going to cheapen. It cheapens the charge of anti-Semitism, which is a huge problem. It's a massive problem right now. We have the richest man in the world using a gigantic social media platform to enable, like, people with the highest percentage of Hitler particles in the world, right? Genuine, like, absolute frothing at the mouth Jew haters are being propagated by the richest man on the fucking planet. It's so problematic, right? It's such a gigantic issue that we have. But we're still talking about the Jam Man. We're still talking about the Jam Man wanting there to be some kind of peace accord happening, wanting to hold a nation state accountable for its actions. Not because it's a Jewish nation state, not because it's Israel, but because it's any nation state that is doing these things that can act with complete impunity. And I'm at my wit's end. I'm literally at my wit's end, because this was all completely avoidable. All of this was totally avoidable. I hope MPs are going to start questioning their own legacy and association to this madness. They won't actually question any of it. As long as they're still getting their £85,000 a year, as long as they can still use that to get a high-paying job in industry later, why the hell would they care about whether Palestinian children are dying or not? Why the fuck would they care? Why would they care, right? These do root and branch reform of our political system. Clear it out. It's not fit for purpose. It's completely unfit for purpose. And then again, the same delusional liberals like Ian Dunn will tell you that there's something about the current political class that's failed, rather than the system that existed that enabled those political class in the first place. The systems that created these people's ability to be able to do the things that they have done. They won't have any systemic analysis. They'll just say, look, well, actually, we just have the problem with the bad politicians rather than the good politicians, rather than the nature of our system that breeds these kind of things, that allows these kind of dynamics to take shape. But how do we solve these problems? There are Israeli officials saying the only thing that Arabs listen to, the only thing that Arabs can hear or learn from is losing land. And so the outcome has to be gaining some territory. I don't think it'll happen. I think it'll probably be avoided by the international community, because I think if Israel does start taking land from Gaza, they will literally be all-out war in the Middle East. What do you think about them being accused of being implicit in inciting war crimes and councillors resigning over it? I mean, it's the accountability. The only reason why they're even being held accountable is because, there are some people here with a sense of perspective, a sense of morality to be able to do that. And then the reason why we're in this position is because of the same neo-McCarthyism that meant that they couldn't have any criticism of Israel. They were so absolutely terrified of criticising Israel that they just tacitly endorsed war crimes live on telly, live on the radio. Just, war crimes A-okay with me. Israel has that right. Just tacitly endorsing it. I don't think they were doing it because they actually thought it was fine. Keir Starmer, again, he's a human rights lawyer. Emily Thornberry is a barrister. I think they were trying to have some kind of position that they could take so they wouldn't be accused of anti-Semitism, given the neo-McCarthyism of the jumbly-crumbly era. And then, Keir Starmer is a political idiot. The man's was an MP for 5 years before being elected the leader of the biggest political party in Europe. And he basically only became an MP so that Ed Miliband could have a shadow attorney general with experience and with clout, right? And he was just on making things up on the fly, not knowing how to have a proper comm strategy, because we've all seen the continued failure of Labour's comm strategy up to this point from this entire electoral cycle. And this came home to roost, where they didn't have a proper comm strategy, so they just ignored the question and gave tacit support for war crimes. And now they're staring down the barrel of actual international legal action, and they have to do a humiliating climb down. I think that's really what turned them around. But now, of course, they have this big meeting. Apparently the entirety of the shadow cabinet, the whole front bench, are all meeting now to discuss what their communication is going to be moving forward, because they are seeing a mass exodus of members, of voters, of even councillors. Like, multiple councillors have resigned over this stuff. And it is all down to the political idiocy of a political novice in the form of Keir Starmer, the failure of the comms team to know what the hell that they're doing, and a genuine terrified position that they've taken, where they can't be seen to criticise actions of the state of Israel lest they be accused of anti-Semitism, lest they be accused of being like Jeremy Corbyn. They've always been sold on the lie that Israel always acts within international law, humanitarian snipers taking down violent extremists while swiping off its ear. Well, the thing is, we already know that as well. You're right, ADX, they still believe that stuff because, again, these are deeply incurious individuals. But we already have the actual stuff from this. We have the UN report that Emily Thornberry herself quoted in the comments, the UN report on the Great March of Return, where Israeli snipers, according to a United Nations report, no less, that the Conservative government abstained on ratifying, a UN report claiming that officially stated that Israel had been killing medics with impunity. And this is what they got. This is what they wanted. They wanted to do this. They wanted to weaponize this stuff to be able to get the party back under their control. And now they've created a monster that they now can't slay. The toothpaste is not going back in the fucking tube now. And now we have an entire kind of political consensus here that if you're pro-Palestinian, you're pro-Hamas. And if you are Jewish, then you must be Zionist and be pro-Israel, right? And that is anti-Semitic. That's literally anti-Semitism people are doing, where they are in their own, where the body politic in its own head is somehow equating Judaism with Zionism, or Jewish people with the state of Israel. That is textbook anti-Semitism, to try and claim that you British Jewish people are in some way like intimately connected with a strip of land that they've literally never lived on in some cases, but just because it's like the ethno-state that was created for Jewish people, suddenly it means that they should be interconnected automatically in terms of the body politic in this country. And that is literally anti-Semitic, because if they're a dual citizen, fair enough, right, whatever, but even then they shouldn't be held accountable, right? Even if they were a citizen, even if they were a dual citizen, and even the citizens of Israel shouldn't be held accountable. This isn't a citizen problem. This is a state problem. This is a government problem. This is a Benjamin Netanyahu problem. This isn't an Israeli citizen problem. Because even they aren't representative of their government, right? It's a representative democracy in which there is some amount of turnout, right? They can't be, and there's levels of manufactured consent as well. They can't be held specifically accountable as a population for the actions of their own government either. So this whole narrative, this whole dynamic is just complete nonsense from the beginning. Complete nonsense from the beginning. beginning. Honestly, even a novice politician should know not to support war crimes/crimes against humanity. It's really stupid. I just don't think that he properly understood the position that he would have to take as leader of the opposition saying those things in public, right? I don't think he realised the enormity of what he represented. Everyone can agree that Netanyahu is to blame, at least, I guess, except non-Israeli conservatives. I mean, even then, it's still up in the air. It's still it's still something that you might get criticised for saying, rather than saying only Hamas can be to blame for this, because of course material conditions are in no way influencing of this. And then obviously Netanyahu helping Hamas get money to be the competitor to Fatah on the West Bank. I think, look, the actual citizens of Israel blame Netanyahu more for this than the international community do, at least in Western states, right? At least in the UK and the US, as far as the politicians are concerned. The Israeli citizens are far more sensible on this in blaming Netanyahu for his own state failures. I pointed out on Novara the other day, right? He should be keeping his own citizens safe. And in the pursuit of his pro-settlement policy, of his antagonistic policy towards the Palestinian Authority and towards the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, in his desire to be as antagonistic as possible, he's put his entire population at risk. He has jeopardized the security of his entire country with his own political ambitions. And now thousands of people are dead. Thousands of people are dead. Thousands of innocent Israeli citizens partying, right? Partying at a rave in kibbutzim in the south, and they're dead now. They're never coming back. And the international community, Netanyahu, Hamas, there's so many people that could have prevented this, and they didn't. And I despair. I absolutely despair. It's so tragic. And it's even more tragic that it was avoidable. Jewish media has gone after Bibi. Yeah, 100%. Like, Haaretz have been incredibly critical. Like, if you want a fair view of this conflict, you basically have to read Israeli media on this. You have to read Israeli media, because Israeli media are the only people who know the situation on the ground to be critical. Because Western media is just completely uncritical and just paints. Hey, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for memberships. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.